Thank
They
you.
can certainly send me a chat in the question and answers or in the chat window and let me know that they want to speak and I can unmute them and they can testify. Okay, Linda Dorsey Walker. Let me see if I can find Ms. Walker. And there she is. Okay. Ms. Walker,
Yes.
okay, go ahead and you can testify or start testifying whenever you're ready.
Sure. One of the things that has come to light as a result of this whole COVID crisis is that we've lost the manufacturing capability here in the United States to meet our crisis needs, not just for medical equipment, but other types of equipment. Now we're relying totally, almost, on many of the Asian countries to provide everything that we need. I want to find out if it's possible for us to reestablish here in Baltimore County more of the Make It in America First effort. Manufacture it here in America first. And let's start with Baltimore County. We used to be a big manufacturing concern, and we tore down a lot of the older sites because we just figured they wouldn't be used anymore. But now we realize that shouldn't have been done. We need to be able to take care of ourselves within our own shores, and let's start with Baltimore County first. I hope someone else feels the same way.
Thank you for your testimony. Madam Chair, I still have not found Mr. Cannon.
Okay. Did we have anyone else that would like to share? That's okay. I don't have any more chats here.
Yes, Ms. Savoy,
Okay.
let me bring her in. Ms. Savoy?
Hello, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am a teacher at Baltimore County Public Schools at Woodlawn High School, and I appreciate the concerns that were brought by Ms. Bergman. And I also want to sign on to those and really passionately advocate for not making significant cuts to the budget regarding education, especially as we are in this. We already needed more support in our schools, and speaking from a teacher at Woodlawn High School, we need a lot of resources. And in the COVID-19 era, as Ms. Bergman spoke of, we have to have more resources. We need to make sure we can retain educators. The rate of losing teachers within their first 3 years is really stunning and tragic, and we need to make sure we're investing in our schools because that is the key to shifting our economy in every other area if we take a long-term view. And I know that you all see that as well, and I want to thank you for letting me share my concerns.
Thank you.
Ms. Savoy,
Yes.
Councilman Izzy Patoka here. First, thank you for providing testimony, and thank you for choosing the profession of teacher. And thank you for teaching at Woodlawn High, because that's from when I graduated from Woodlawn.
Yeah.
Quite some time ago, probably before you were teaching. But I think, you're clearly, I hear your passion, and I've heard it from many, many teachers. In fact, I don't ever recall speaking to a teacher in Baltimore County that hasn't said, I put out my own money for supplies.
Yeah.
Because we just don't have it in our budget. And so I think the reason teachers do that is because to me, it's not that that the teachers I speak to don't view it as a job,
Yes.
as a profession, an identity. It's something they do to benefit our community at large. So I just want to say thank you for providing testimony tonight. And certainly we're going to do our best to support our teachers and our schools and the children and the families that go to the to Baltimore County School.
Thank you, Councilman.
You're welcome.
Councilman Batoka.
Thank you.
Chris, we have any more speakers?
I do not have any more, no one else has requested, and I have not found Mr. Cannon. He has not shown up.
Okay, well, it's 6:30. I think that if he was going to be present, he would be by now, unless he's had difficulties on his device. Maybe something came up. Do any of the members have anything to add before we close tonight's meeting?
I do, Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Quirk.
Yeah, I did want to say for the people listening to this webcast, first of all, thank you for being part of this. And I think one thing that's really, really important, especially for people that value, education or value, the services of local government, whether it's police or firefighters or public works. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The County Council will be talking again with Senator Chris Van Hollen tomorrow morning. And I think what's absolutely essential, what's absolutely critical is that the federal government helps states and helps local governments. If they're going to bail out airlines, they're going to bail out stock investors through helping corporations. Well, I think the state of Maryland or the state of New York, or the state of California, or all the states in this country and all the local governments, I think, are as important, actually more important than some of these Fed rescues that we're seeing elsewhere. So I would just encourage the listeners to make sure they're in touch with their United States senators and the United States congresspeople and saying that, you know what, police are important, teachers are important, our firefighters are important, the people that work on roads and pick up the trash, all those people are important. And so hopefully the federal government's going to make sure that they remember that state and local government is really important, and that will help us deal with this major budget shortfall that unfortunately we all now have to wrestle with.
Thank you, Councilman Quirk.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Marks.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who is listening tonight. I think all of us are going through the same experiences. First of all, this is the first time any of us have governed during a recession. That includes the 3 senior members of the council, myself included. But secondly, all of us are now juggling a lot of responsibilities. People look to us to help with unemployment, even though that is a state issue. They look for us to help with ordinary needs that need to be addressed. And I certainly want to thank the county administration and the governor's staff for the help they have provided us. I will agree with Councilman Quirk, certainly. It is extremely important that the federal government provides assistance to local and state governments like it has to many corporations. We have managed to craft a budget, the county executive has presented a budget that instead of going into the operating fund, goes into the capital fund. I looked back over the years to the last time we had a major recession, and that is what the county administration at that time did. They cut into the operating budget. Councilman Quirk is exactly correct. If we do not have support from the federal government, it is going to be very difficult to have an operating budget funding police and firefighters and teachers that we want to have in this county government. All of us have the same goals to make sure that our neighborhoods are safe and healthy, that our citizens are protected, and to get through this economic calamity as quickly as possible. But I certainly agree with Councilman Quirk. It is very important that you let your federal legislators know that we needed a federal plan presented that supports local governments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Marks.
Madam Chair.
Councilman Jones?
Yes, let me just take this opportunity to, of course, thank you for your leadership and also agree with Councilman Quirk as well as Councilman Marks. I think we all are recognizing these are some very trying times we are in. Our revenues are significantly down, and the money, as Councilman Marks mentioned, the money is in people. The money is not so much in capital projects, the money, most of our money goes out to people. That's teachers, police officers, firefighters, detention center officers, public works. That's where our money goes. And if we do not get some significant help from the federal government, and, you know, I'm afraid to say we may have to do all sorts of things in the terms of trying to balance our budget. So there's no doubt about it. We need additional teachers. We need an awful lot of things, but no one foresaw this calamity coming, and our revenues are off significantly. And I would urge all the callers to make your voices known to our federal delegation that we need help here in Baltimore County, as well as many other counties and cities across the country. And the notion that some would suggest that we just declare bankruptcy is just absurd. So anyway, thank you very much for your time. And thank all the callers and all the people here for joining the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Chris, I believe we now have a caller.
Yes, Mr. Cox would like to testify, so I'm going to bring him in.
Thank you.
Cox?
Yes. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and I apologize for taking so long to engage. But I do want to say that a couple of things. First thing that I must say is that I was very disappointed that the only way I found out about this particular meeting was from a city resident who happens to get the Sun paper, who notified me. Other than that, I would have never known this existed, which is very disappointing. I think there should be a better way to reach out to people, maybe use the radio, use some other way to let us, because let's face it, we're all home at this point in time. We can't work. And we're all, you know, not all of us read the Sun paper. So that's just that. Now, the second thing I want to kind of touch base on is I was listening to the Councilman Wade there for a moment. Not Wade, I'm sorry, Mr. Koch. It was Julian Jones, and he had mentioned that, you know, this is a tough time and revenues are down, and we all understand why revenues are down. Wouldn't this be a really good time for Baltimore County to do some sort of a search and look at zero-based budgeting? In other words, let's take a look at where the waste is. Let's start cutting from the budget and not assuming that everything is going to increase by 2 or 3% each and every year. Doesn't that make a little bit more sense than to just continue to take money out of the people? And let's face it, right now, all of us business owners, which I am, you know, we don't have this kind of money to be taken from us. So maybe we should look at cutting things as opposed to taking more in a time where people need it. Does that make any sense? I'm sorry.
Mr. Cox, this is Councilwoman Bevins. I think you hit the nail on the head. As you know or may not know, the county council can only take away. We can't add to the budget. And I can just about guarantee that the 7 of us will be combing through this budget with a fine-tooth comb. We understand the necessity of finding the cost savings, especially during this budget, and appreciate you sharing that with us.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman Catch.
Yes, I think it's imperative that the council make the necessary cuts to the 2021 budget so that we don't find ourselves in the position next year of having to make draconian cuts because the revenues aren't coming in as we anticipated. As I talked with Lauren and Liz of our audit department, and I'm hearing numbers like $250 million in revenue short of what we're expecting. So I think now's a good time for us to make those cuts. And then once the cuts are made, let's see how it works. Let's see if some of the cuts that we make, that we possibly don't fund those particular programs in the future if we determine they're not needed. And as far as zero-based budgeting goes, it is a strategy that every government should adopt. I'm a big advocate of it.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman Marks?
Yes, I agree with everything that's been said, and we have an auditor staff that is combing through this budget right now. Every year they come to us with recommended cuts, and I will tell you that both Democrats and Republicans last year did vote for cuts. In fact, we went back and forth, and we didn't agree on every cut, but I think it was the most cut out of any county budget
It was.
in a while. So I agree with a lot of what's been said. Just keep in mind that, my experience is a lot of people are philosophically conservative, but then when a project impacts their neighborhood they've been waiting for, they get cold feet. And but we're definitely going to have to make some very tough decisions this year. But hopefully the auditor staff will give us a good blueprint for where we go.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I appreciate the comments of everyone. And let me just say this, it's sort of like the elephant in the room. One of the things I mentioned was our money, most of our money doesn't go to capital projects. Most of our money pay for employees, teachers, firefighters, police, detention center officers. So when we talk about real big cuts, don't think that there's this big fat project out there that's not worth anything and we can cut it and save $200 million. When we talk about these big numbers and you start talking about cutting, just point out which people you want to lay off while you're doing it, or furlough.
Madam Chair, I need to clarify something.
Yes, Councilman Marks?
The auditor staff simply identifies possible cuts. They do not recommend them. Just want to clarify that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman Quirk?
Yeah, I'm hopeful, and I would love to see the administration, the county executive, our labor negotiation by Sean Malone. I know he's not my consultant. I think we need to break our labor groups as well, and everybody sit around a table and everybody be part of the solution. This is going to require shared sacrifice. And there's a lot of taxpayers out there right now that are unemployed, that have lost their jobs. I think in the county, we have to put trying to protect our jobs as one of our top priorities. But if we do that, then we have to say, well, if that's our top priority, then what can we cut or reduce or delay in order to weather significant financial hit? Even if the federal government does give us money, and hopefully they do, because when McConnell says, let the states go bankrupt, that's saying let's have economic Armageddon. That's what it really means. I think that was an incredibly irresponsible statement. But we have to have labor involved in this, and I would hope that the administration can reach out to our labor groups, because I'm very confident and very certain that they're going to place jobs above anything else, even if it means delaying or scaling in cost of living adjustments. And we also have to look at maintenance of effort. We're going to fight maintenance of effort. But these cuts that have to be made, even with federal money, are exceptionally significant. And so this next month could be difficult. So I think we all have to work together in bipartisanship and really try to come up with something that we feel does the best job we can and minimizes the type of possible losses that could happen if we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Quirk. Chris, I believe that we,
Madam Chair,
Lance back.
is he?
Okay.
Sorry.
We'll get ready to take a poll. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One comment I'd like to offer, certainly the biggest, I want to thank Councilman Quirk. I think he wrote a thoughtful piece which covered a lot of ground. And Mr. Koch, the zero-based budgeting is intriguing, but the biggest unknown variable that we face as a council and as a county is what our revenues are going to be in the next fiscal years and the years to follow. So we there's been revenue estimates that have been made. It's unclear as to how accurate they are given the situation that's in front of us. I would be reticent to make draconian cuts now, but to think as we move forward into fiscal 2021, if the revenues aren't as strong as we hope they will be, to look at the option of mid-year cuts. And I think that, and I asked our secretary to look into this. I believe we have the authority as a council, similar to the Board of Public Works in the state of Maryland, the Board of Estimates in Baltimore City. If the revenues aren't strong, we meet every other week. And certainly the SAC, the Spending Affordability Committee continues to meet, that we can adjust as necessary moving through the fiscal year. And something I would just suggest we think about. Certainly, we're going to have to give we'll have to look at this budget with a different lens than we've looked at other budgets in the past. I mean, we've been thorough, but we had a better idea of what the revenues were that were going to come into the county, and now we're a little unclear as to how strong those revenues were.
Absolutely, I agree. Thank you, Councilman. We have a caller on the line now, Chris.
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Dennis, I'm going to bring him in.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dennis?
Hi, how are you guys doing?
We're good.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I just wanted to echo a couple of the things the other callers had said, such as the lack of, I don't want to say disclosure, but the lack of information to publicize the meeting. I thought it was a little strange it wasn't available for the town hall meetings of the Baltimore County website. I can't imagine how many people still read the Baltimore Sun, considering the business of this. A little strange. I'm hoping that you guys still want residents to be involved and also hear our feedback. Other things that came to mind is that I'm just concerned a lot of the business support in Baltimore County is not as strong as what it used to be. If you notice, a lot of businesses, are closed down. They've now turned from a desolate building into a concrete parking lot. And I think, really bringing businesses and small businesses back to Baltimore is really a great way for us to also get revenue. I love the explanation that you provided with the way that the property taxes are raising, but the bottom line is that the money is still increasing, whether it's the property value or whether it's the tax rate. It's still increasing for customers or for people that are living in Baltimore County. Everyone is now paying more. Whether the way you talk about it or the way that you try to manipulate it, it's still the same. Also, I want to make sure that we're not too much focusing on the federal funding. We're depending on the federal government to do so much, and that's not always something that you can count on. Very often we need to make sure that we can withstand ourselves, possibly cutting things and trimming some of the fat. I've noticed that since the new executive has come on, it seems like there are more, say, employees now that are employed for, Baltimore County, so it's getting a little heavier. There's more committees, it seems to be, as well as more people working, which is more money for the county. So we just need to make sure that we're keeping as the fat trimmed off and the programs that are important, such as police, fire, that kind of stuff. I know you say that most of the capital projects have been cut down, and that's not what most of the money goes to. But, social programs are also, I'm sure, a big thing that money is spent. That's really important to make sure that we're not relying on the federal government. Even though you think that what Mitch McConnell said is a joke, that could be something that we're faced with. we need to prepare ourselves, if we don't get federal money, because there's 50 states, so, cut up a pie pretty small. I just want to sure that you guys are working on, bringing small businesses back, a lot of which have since moved out of Baltimore County, and really focus on more of the core programs and less of the socialized programs, so that they're still not relying on the federal government, because the idea that they're going to send us money and just fix everything is very, very unrealistic. And I think you can all agree with it. So, I think that's, I pretty much said most of it. Bette Dickinson is a huge and great supplier of medical things in the Hunt Valley area. And we need to put our focus on making sure that we're providing them and helping them, and we're all working as a community to make sure that that is what we're looking for. And,
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the 3 minutes has been up 30 seconds ago.
okay.
Yeah, thank you for calling in. Appreciate it.
Madam Chair?
Yes, was that Councilman Quirk?
Yeah, I would just say, respect that if we don't get federal money, the amount of cuts that we're going to have to make will definitely include furloughs and/or maybe job elimination. And I would also say respectfully, the idea of mid-year cuts might be more suited if this was like a minor pullback or say a mild recession. But if we were going to delay cuts up front, what I think unintended could happen is towards the middle of the year, we might be forced to lay off or eliminate jobs in a much more dramatic fashion. And so I'd just be real careful about the hold off. We just had a huge budget, not a minor hit, a huge hit almost overnight. Unemployment rate has skyrocketed. I've sat on economic forecasting calls by JP Morgan and others that still forecast unemployment rate still being double digits even a year from now. So this is not something that's just going to magically bounce back. But I also think we do have to prepare. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. We need to have a plan that if we don't get federal money, we need to also have a plan on how we're going to deal with that. And hopefully we do, but it would be fiscally irresponsible of the county, when the county exec, to assume we're going to get X amount of money when we don't know that's a done deal. So I would just be real careful about the mid-year review, because the budget that is presently submitted is slightly below the spending affordability guidelines that were issued when the world was 100% different than what it is today. And everything has literally flipped on its head about 180 degrees. And so I think we have to deal with what we know now, because if we delay, I think it's going to be much, much worse if we have to make farther cuts mid-year. Thanks.
Madam Chair?
Thank you, Councilman Quirk. And I would just like to say I'm especially grateful that you're a part of this body, because you know these numbers inside and out. It's what you do for a living. And I'm so glad that you're here with us at this time, for sure.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman Catch.
Yes. I want to comment on what the councilman from the first district said. I totally agree with him that we need to make the necessary cuts now. I was in state government in 2008 when we had the last downturn. And the longer you wait to address the revenues that are decreasing, the more the cuts are draconian that you need to make. In other words, it's much easier to deal with a $50 million deficit with 8 months left in the year than it is with 2 months left in the year. And I remember back in 2008, those cuts were not made until March. And you can imagine that, you cut a salary by 2%, and that 2% have to be implemented in March, April, May, June, July, instead of if they had made a cut at the beginning of the year. So he's absolutely right. If we can make those cuts now, it's going to make it much easier on everyone.
My concern is we go into the school year. I would be concerned about going into the school year of 2021 and not having sufficient amount of teachers if we're back in the classroom at that time. That's why I'm suggesting that we wait to have more clarity in terms of what our revenues are. And for other core functions, public safety, I think it was our last caller, Mr. Dennis, talked about keeping the core functions. So we need to define what those core functions are. Public safety, police, is code enforcement, I would ask, is code enforcement a core function? And I believe it is, but the way the county has grown, we haven't kept up with the need for code enforcement. So for example, in 2006, we had almost 40 employees that were doing code enforcement. Today, we have less than 20. So how do we, and our county has grown since that time. So I certainly appreciate that our revenues are going to be challenging. I would just suggest that certainly we need to cut. That's our job, and that's our responsibility, to go through the budget and carefully make cuts where necessary. We did it last year, I think, to the tune of 12 or 14 million. And we were thorough last year. I think we'll be thorough again this year. My concern is that we start to cut away at the core and we disassemble the progress that we've made. And that's why I would suggest looking at the time when we have more clarity of what our revenues are to take the appropriate actions at that time.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Are there any more callers, Chris?
No, Madam Chair, although Ms. Bergman has her hand raised, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was recently thinking about how our farmers in Baltimore County are doing. It's been playing on the news a lot that the farmers have to get rid of their stock because they don't have a place to sell it to yet. I'm volunteering every Saturday and I'm seeing a lot of families with food insecurity. And I was wondering if the county has had any discussion to see how we could help our local farmers and make sure that they don't destroy all that food and we could get it to families in needs. With food insecurity in the county. I just wanted to know if that's something that is part of the county budget or it could be included. I don't know. I'm just really concerned about that.
I don't know if there's been conversations about that, but there's been tons of conversations with farmers about the produce that we are receiving that has been given away every single Friday Saturday for the last month, and will continue to do so. 30 to 40 hours worth of fresh produce every single Saturday to everyone that pulls up, also including non-perishables. So I know that they have worked with several farmers. They're not just coming from one, they're coming from different folks. So I know where that food's coming from, but I think I'm understanding what you're talking about, where the milk farmers are dumping all their milk because the schools are closed and they don't have a market for it, and the farmers are doing the same thing. And I hate to see that waste too. So it would be a wonderful thing if somehow that could all go to the food bank, and maybe it is. Maybe we have to have a conversation with the food bank to find out if they are receiving any of that fresh produce. So we can, I believe you're Tom's constituent. And maybe we can follow up on that, and Tom could give you a call about that.
Thank you.
Mhm. Do any members have anything else to say this?
I do, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
In a second, I'm going to ask Mr. Bostwick to give us a kind of the definitions of the budget process and when it is due. But I'll just preface that request with something that Mr. Katz said that struck me is that one, as Mr. Bostwick will explain, we don't have a choice but to deliberate and vote on this budget. That it needs to be done. If we don't vote on this budget, then the budget is adopted. Mr. Bostwick can, without our approval, and Mr. Bostwick can explain that. But it is this is the only time in my 6 years on the council that we have faced the next fiscal year during the budget process where we don't know what revenues are going to be and how drastically. We can all predict a shortfall, but we don't know how drastic that shortfall is going to be. So I think that Mr. Katch's point is well taken, that it is going to be easier for the administration and for us as a council to do the best that we can with the knowledge that we have currently, rather than next spring have to face a deficit and try to unwind the budget then to take care of things that are of absolute necessity that we have not budgeted for. And to Councilman Patoka's point, this is going to take more work than maybe we anticipated on this budget process, because we are going to have to define the must-haves, the like-to-haves, and the things that are simply luxuries. And so I've been identifying, as all of you have, some cuts that I would like to see explored. And of course, we're all awaiting the auditor's office work on what they've identified as potential cuts. And I imagine their job is a little bit tougher this year as well. My dogs in the background are a little concerned as well, if you can't hear them. So I'll sign off and let Mr. Bostwick, can you explain the budget process for us? And the timeline that we're mandated to follow, and what happens if we try to delay the vote and the approval of the budget.
I certainly can, Mr. Crandall. As you know, the county executive is required to submit his budget to the council at least 75 days before the end of the fiscal year, which is April 15th of each year. Then Section 709 of the charter is entitled Action on the Budget by the County Council. And the County Council, after a public hearing, which is what you're doing this evening, the County Council may decrease, and I'm going to read this because I think it's important, not very long. The County Council may decrease or delete any item in the budget except those required by the public general laws of the state, and accept any provision for debt service on obligations then outstanding or for estimated cash deficits. The County Council shall have no power to change the form of the budget as submitted by the executive, to alter the revenue estimates except to correct mathematical errors, or to increase any expenditure recommended by the county executive for current or capital purposes. And the budget adoption by a majority of the council members, a simple majority. The county council, after reviewing the budget, is required to make a decision on the budget at least by June 1st of each year. The way it's worded is somewhat convoluted. I think it says that the county, the council shall adopt it on or before the first day of the last month of the fiscal year currently ending. That's a fancy way of saying by June 1st. And if the council fails to do that, then the budget submitted by the executive shall stand adopted, and the funds for the expenditures proposed shall stand appropriated as fully. So, you know, your task is a very difficult one. You are the last line of, I don't like to say defense, but you're the last line to have any say on the budget and what it will look like going forward for the next fiscal year. So this is really your best shot, so to speak, to review it, review the auditor's proposed cuts, not recommended, but ones that they point out that may be available, and to make those difficult decisions.
Madam Chair?
Yes, is that Councilman Catch?
Yes, I have a question for Councilman Quirk and Lauren as well. With the rainy day fund, do we have any guidance from the rating agencies as to when it is legitimate to use some of the rainy day funds? Just how bad do things have to be before you can use it where it's not going to negatively affect your credit rating? For instance, let's say in April, we find ourselves $100 million in the hole. I think it'd be very difficult to find $100 million in cuts for 3 months. I mean, that would be really very, very difficult to do. What are the circumstances, if there are any, that you could really touch the rainy day fund?
And take a stab at that first. I'm curious on your comments as well, Lauren. But looking at our legislative analysts, their preliminary forecasting for general revenue funds was as much as perhaps 70 million in this current fiscal year, like one we're in right now. And that in effect, it wipes out basically all of the tax windfall, basically looking at what we all just voted on in the past. And then for fiscal year 2021, it could be as much as 200 million. Our rainy day fund is about 207.2 million. And so basically we could spend possibly our whole rainy day fund. Now, that's not an unknown. I'm hearing like we don't know what revenues are going to be, but I would say it's very safe to assume that revenues are going to be really terrible, like perhaps like tsunami, like pretend a tsunami in Baltimore County terrible. And so what we don't know is we don't know what the federal government money is going to be, but I think we do need to have a budget that plans for the worst, hopes for the best. Now, credit rating agencies, I mean, if there's ever a true definition of when would you use a rainy day fund, well, it's certainly not only raining, we have a deluge, we have a complete storm out there, similar to the floods that happened in Oella and Ellicott City not too long ago. So I think this is something we all have to take incredibly seriously. I completely 100% agree with Councilman Catch that if we wait till mid-year, we're going to wind up really regretting it, because if we get to that level and it's as bad as it could be, the cuts that we're going to make are going to be much, much worse than if we did it right now. So, Lauren?
I agree with everything you said, Councilman. I'm looking at the definition of the rainy day fund, and it's an account that's established within the general fund to hedge against major revenue shortfalls. So this or other fiscal emergencies. So it is there for that purpose.
So I guess it's we're the ones that set the definition of what a significant revenue loss is.
Right. As far as the balance that you must maintain, and as you recall, recently it was raised to 10%. So it had been closer to 7%, but it is at 10%. So there's roughly over 200 million right now sitting in that account.
And I know that our Director of Budget, Ed Blades, is on the call. And so what Director Blades can do also is he can be in touch with the credit rating analysts and have conversations about what things might mean and how do we deal with the pandemic, and also ask how other AAA counties are also dealing with a significant budget hit. But this would definitely be an example of when we might need to fall back on the rainy day fund, because the alternative would be cut employees, maybe eliminating hundreds and hundreds of jobs. Mindful of
Madam Chair.
budget cuts.
Yes, Ms. Rogers?
Good evening, everyone. Councilmember Quirk, I will say that this is one of the ongoing topics that we do have. We have weekly calls with, at least at my level and then the county executives level, with our peers across the state, the CAOs of the counties. We're all talking about this, what our shortfalls look like and strategies that we're taking. And the county executives are also talking about it. So it's definitely high on our radar in terms of what the forecasts look like and what we need to do. So those conversations definitely are taking place. And I'm sure Mr. Blades and I are happy to talk with the rating agency staff to get more insight. But we're all in the same boat, as everyone says.
Do the rating agencies look at jurisdictions on a comparative basis? Because right now it's raining across the country. And so does the baseline drop for what's AAA, what's AA? And so, does anybody have a sense of that?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Blades on that one, Councilmember Patoka.
Councilman, I think it's premature to have that assumption in place. Yes, there are, I don't expect them to change their methodology and how they look at AAA rated counties. Don't know if there'll be any flexibility in that area at all. We are working with our bond counsel. We are talking to other counties and you know, we'll be talking with you as well as we work through this budget process. So
I'm assuming we're in the
now
same.
there's nothing definitive.
I'm assuming we're in the same boat as every other county in the United States.
Yes, but it's different
That's
degrees.
why I was wondering if that
Degrees,
changes
you
the
know.
whole baseline.
We're not as dependent on some other, as other jurisdictions in Baltimore and Maryland. We're not as dependent on tourism dollars, so that helps offset some things. We did raise income taxes last year, so that's another thing that's helping us. But so it's every jurisdiction is facing the same problem, but every facing it different.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blades.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman Quirk?
Yeah, I do want to say one other thing, that I think one of the things that could be a potential game changer looking at basically everything that we're dealing with is the federal government is contemplating doing a pretty massive infrastructure bill, perhaps $1 trillion to $2 trillion, and maybe financing it with a 50-year bond while interest rates are so low. And I think that could also be pretty significant because that will also have a multiplier effect, and that will actually employ people, and those jobs will multiply themselves and maybe start getting some of this unemployment rate down. So not that we can budget on hope, because we surely can't do that, but I'm hopeful, and of course when we talk to Senator Van Hollen tomorrow, that the federal government will seriously consider doing a massive infrastructure bill, because I do think that will help reduce the unemployment rate that might stay persistent otherwise. So that's another thing, but we can't budget for that, obviously. We have to budget for what we know today, but it is something that I think could be significantly helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Quirk. Anyone else? Chris, anyone else on the line?
No one has reached out, Madam Chair.
Okay. I would like to, before we end this meeting, I would just like to take another opportunity to just say I'm incredibly proud of this body of government and our support staff, Secretary Boswick and Chris Belcastro. I think this is a new day for us, and we are here to let you know that Baltimore County government is still moving. And, you know, we have kept everything in check since day one. We're holding our work sessions. We're holding our council meetings. You know, we had basic services maps today. We had a work session. We're having this remotely. So it's a different way of running government and making sure that every step is still being taken. And it was a little bit of adapting for all of us at the beginning. But I think we got it down now. And I think each and every one of us want our constituents to know that we're all working. We're working on your behalf. We will continue to work on your behalf. We know there are so many families out there suffering right now. There's so much sickness in not just the state of Maryland, but in Baltimore County. Our numbers are still rising. People are still dying. There is certainly a food shortage for many, many families, and they line up by the hundreds, if not the thousands, on Saturdays who have never been in a food line before to receive food. I'm so grateful for the county executive who has been so compassionate and so transparent and so willing to help each and every constituent in Baltimore County. And this will probably be the hardest budget that we have to get through, and it's going to be even more difficult because we're doing it this way. We're not sitting in a room all together going line by line. So this is going to be very difficult for us to get through, but we will make the cuts that we need to make, and it will hurt. It's going to hurt us all in some way, some form or fashion. So I just want to thank everybody that keeps participating, that keeps showing up, that keeps taking the phone calls, the people that showed up tonight, who took the time to, so we have listeners that were participating as well. And I just want to thank each and every one of you and hope that, soon this will get better and we'll all be together again and in one room instead of doing it this way. So I'm very, very grateful, and thank you all for coming out tonight, and for all of those who were here to listen or participate. Thank you for coming out on the proposed budget for 2021. I wish everybody a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.